Okay. Thanks.
This is Kyle. Is this the developing 21st century infrastructure?
We can't hear you, Coyote. I think your network is not so good. So welcome everyone. As you're coming in, let us know where you're dialing in from, whether you're in Lagos proper or somewhere else in the world. You are going to have a fantastic time today because we have experts in the area of sustainability finance and impact investing who will be talking with us today and sharing their insights about not just the examples from their work, but also how it relates to Lagos State and how Lagos State can implement some of the key areas around sustainable finance and impact investing. Before we go on, I will just very quickly like to just quick housekeeping. Please keep your phone on your, keep everything on mute unless you're speaking. And also, if there are any questions that you have, please place it in the chat and that will be helpful as we move forward. Thank you for joining us. So the topic of our session is sustainability finance and impact investing. And with us today, we have a very robust panel that kind of is across the world, if you will. We have an international panel from India to Germany to the US and Nigeria. So we're going to have a rich conversation. Very quickly, my name is Oluwatoyin Adegbite-Moore. I'm the Executive Director, West Africa for the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance. And we're a Pan-African organization focused on really unlocking new capital for social investment across Africa. And we do that through three areas, really. We just recently launched a landscape for social investments in Africa. So helping the ecosystem better understand the continent's finance and non-finance developmental challenge and the role of social investment through this comprehensive study, attracting and connecting social investors within Africa and delivering a value-added array of tools and services and strategies to improve their effectiveness as investors. We've set up a deal share platform, which we're hoping a lot of investors, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa and indeed even internationally, will come on and bring their deals. So there will be more co-investment that would help small to medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, and other entrepreneurs who are looking to scale up their innovative products and services. A gender platform focused on women and girls and opportunities to really promote and address gender equity. And the COVID-19 platform, which again goes, since we're in the pandemic, really kind of aggregating resources and sharing information around how we can all work together to crush COVID-19. And then finally, creating linkages between Africa and social investment communities that are some of our thriving networks in Asia, Europe, and South America. Bringing investors together, not just in Africa, but across the globe. So with that, I'll move on to our first speaker of the day. And you know, sustainability finance has been, you know, quite a topic in recent times. You know, we look at so many different green bonds that have come up. You know, 2 trillion is projected in green bonds financing between 2021 and 2025. Looking at the sustainable debt being surpassed by 1 trillion in 2020. The African Development Bank just launched a 3 billion COVID impact bond in 2020. And also the federal government of Nigeria launched its first sovereign green bond in Africa in December of 2017, 10.7 billion. So given all that, just want to move to our first speaker, Royston Bragaza, who comes from India and is representing Grameen Capital. Grameen Capital came out of the Nobel laureates, Professor Mohammed Yunus, who is came out of the Grameen family of companies. Royston is the CEO, and he's also out of his dream for a capital with a conscience ecosystem. I really like that, capital with a conscience. Royston, along with the Grameen Capital, recently promoted Grameen's impact investments in India, a unique vehicle to provide debt financing to social enterprises across the sector, such as affordable education, skill development, affordable healthcare, clean energy and innovation, agriculture, financial inclusion, and livelihoods. In the beginning of this summit, there was a video that was shared, and one of the things that was said in that video is that Lagos wants to surpass India on a lot of things, and some of these affordable education, skills development, all of those things are tied into Mr. Governor's theme strategy that Lagos wants to implement and see happen as part of Lagos of our dreams. So Royston, please tell us more about your pioneering SDG impact bonds and how Lagos State can learn from and implement it right here. Over to you, Royston.
Thank you so much, Toyin, and it's a pleasure being here with each one of you. Just looking around the room, or the virtual room, I must say, it's pretty inspiring to see people from all the 4 corners of the world. In some sense, there's Africa, there's Asia, there's Europe, and there's America. And when you talked about Nigeria wanting to surpass India, I don't know whether I should be talking to that point, but I do believe for sure that if Nigeria and India collaborate and join hands together, then we will certainly create significant impact in reduction of poverty and in reduction of the inequality that there is across the world. I mean, coming out of the recent data where we are seeing, if you read Bill Gates's goalkeeper report, 25 weeks have set back the world 25 years of development. So just 25 weeks of COVID have created unprecedented pain, and that number could be anywhere between 100 million to 500 million people whose lives could have been impacted. And I think it's in that spirit that I'm super excited, Toyin, about talking to you and Christian and Megan and Maria and Claire and seeing how do we pull together, because I think the time that we are in now is, I mean, we've talked about VUCA world for the last 10 years, but if ever there was a time where VUCA is more pronounced than ever, it is now. And I keep remembering a quote which said that there are decades in which nothing happens, and then there are weeks in which decades happen. Mm-hmm. And literally, we have that opportunity. We've had the problem before us where, weeks took out years or decades of development. But I also see us having the opportunity where if we can put our heads together and our minds together and our hearts together, then there's an opportunity to really build back better, build back greener, build back more inclusive, and build back in the way we want to build back. And so in that light, I want to share a few thoughts over the next 5 to 7 minutes about what really could move the needle as the world comes out of COVID, and probably areas that Nigeria and India could collaborate in bringing that to bear globally and in India. Toyin, you mentioned the billions and the trillions, and that's absolutely right. I mean, there seems to be globally an acceptance around a $30 trillion number as the SDG financing gap. And I think one thing that has proven to us more than anything is that it's not going to come from donor funding and grant money. If you need to hit trillions of dollars, then you need to be talking capital markets. You need to be talking impact investing. You need to be talking mainstream investors. And therefore, one of my journey from Citibank to HSBC to Grameen has been a race to the bottom, as I often joke, from corporate bank to investment bank to mid-market to SME to rock bottom. And that journey has shown me when we talk about trillions of dollars and we look at India for the microfinance sector, here is one asset class that has been able to go and grow to 52 million clients, to $25 billion. And that pace of growth is something that we can be all proud of, irrespective of which part of the world we come from, that it is possible to create viable business solutions. It is possible to create asset classes that are serving the bottom of the pyramid in the impact sector. And that gives us hope to say, how can we together build the same in affordable education? How can we together build the same in clean energy? How can we together build the same in water and sanitation? And what are those models that really will move the needle? And one of those that I want to talk about today are the SDG impact bonds that Grameen Impact in India has pioneered. And I think that could be one of the tools that we are seeing that could really create the type of momentum that we are looking at globally to move that needle as it gets more and more difficult to meet the SDG goals by 2030, given the lagged impact that COVID could have. Two things struck me when I was speaking at the UN General Assembly in 2018 in September in New York. One was that we seem to have dimensioned that we are looking at a $30 trillion gap. And therefore, that needs to come, as I said, from mainstream funding. The second was that there was a paradigm shifting towards pay for success and outcome-based financing. Is there therefore a mechanism to really create a product that brings those two together? And I'm refraining from using the word blended capital because I think that seems to have been misunderstood in many parts, which seems to believe I'm going to compromise on my return commercially and I'm going to compromise in some ways on my scale. I'm going to find a middle ground. No. How do we bring the two together to optimize both? How do we get the best social impact and yet attractive enough commercial returns for mainstream capital to keep coming in? And that's why we pioneered this product called the SDG Impact Bonds. And we didn't call it SIBS or DIBS, which is what the world keeps calling it. Because for one, as a banker, I can't reconcile to why would you name a product based on who is the outcome funder. If it's government, it's SIB. If it's private, it's DIB. You would name a product based on what the product does. So you would call it a working capital loan or a mortgage loan or a health facility loan. And so we called it for what it does. So it's an impact bond focused on goal 5. And that's the first one we did within 3 months of announcing on women's empowerment. We did another one on goal 8 within 3 months of the first impact bond. And we challenged ourselves to say, how can we do this in 3 months instead of 3 years, which the rest of the world is taking to do an impact bond? And we came up with a couple of smarts. We said, why should we find the outcome funder up front? Why do we need to find the outcome funder up front when we can find it during the life of the bond? So let's find the risk capital up front. Let's identify the projects. Let's define the outcomes. And then let's start funding. And along the life of that bond, we can find the outcome funder. So that was one of the smarts that we did. And the other one was actually classic Grameen ethos. Why should we look at a $100 million bond or a $500 million bond? Because there seems to be a fashion right now to call everything in hundreds of millions, and then we cool, and then we're really doing something great. And we said, I would rather do $101 million bonds than do $100 million bond, because the social enterprises that I'm working with need $200,000, need $500,000. That's the amount they need, or $1 million. So why would I want to force fit 100 social enterprises into one bond so that I can announce to the world that I've arrived with a $100 million bond? And so we completely turned it on its head and said, let's create mini impact bonds. And so we call it the SDG micro bonds. And we want to create an SDG micro bond factory where we can keep churning out these bonds on health, on education, water, on sanitation. So we've done the first one on goal 5, the second on goal 8, the third on goal 7 on clean energy. We've done one on 5 and 8 together for women's entrepreneurs. We've done one on 2 for food security. We are doing one on a COVID impact bond. And so that's really what we're trying to say is create products that excite the market, that are small, that can be brought to market. The proof of concept can be brought out quickly, and then phase the growth. So we don't want to be only at $1 million bond, but that's phase 1. In phase 2, we want to do 10x, where we get co-investors to come in and invest in that bond. And then phase 3, a $100 million bond. And that's where we are working with the government on a social stock exchange. So how do we build the ecosystem to be able to support impact investing? It's not just saying this is a sector and the money will flow. How do you get evaluating agencies? How do you get measuring agencies? How do you get guarantee funds? How do you get investment bankers? How do you build out the ecosystem around social enterprises so that they can work? And so I think that really is where I would love to see India and Nigeria collaborate and do a South-South bond, which includes India and Nigeria and Latin America and Papua New Guinea and across the world, because we need to see the South taking primacy of place in the development agenda as we build back better. So I'll stop there, but I can do another round.
Thank you, Royston. I think it's a great start for this conversation. So looking at models that move the needle, models that work. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next speaker, Christian Jan, who is the Executive Director of the Inclusive Business Action Network. And so Christian, you've worked for more than 20 years in development cooperation with a focus on developing and implementing sustainable projects in Africa and Asia. IBAN, Inclusive Business Action Network, that you are heading, is focusing on improving the investment readiness of inclusive businesses and supporting government and improving framework conditions for inclusive business. So, tell us a little bit more. People might, I think the word inclusive, we use it, sparingly. We just kind of use it generally. And some people don't understand really what it means. In some sphere, it's around diversity. In some sphere, it's about, really kind of including women in things that are going on in our communities. So tell us a little bit more about inclusive business, and then, of course, what does Lagos need to do to increase the number of impact businesses? So you can tie your definition into how that relates to impact businesses. Over to you, Christian.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Toyin. It's really nice to be here with all of you, and that what Royston just mentioned, it does not only resonate very well with me, I think he's completely right. We need more of those micro bonds, as complementary to other existing bonds. Now, but let me also say that I really felt honored when I received the invitation here to speak at the Lagos Economic Summit today. And with the question, what does Lagos need? To be honest, sitting in Bonn in Germany, I don't dare to say what Lagos really needs to do and to have more increase impact businesses. But what I could contribute is really that I can share what was successful really in other countries and what is also already included actually quite a number of recommendations and studies that are available, especially also for Nigeria. You just mentioned at the beginning also the study that has been conducted with IIF and colleagues from Ford Foundation and Dahlberg, and also the study that you have conducted from the AVPA side. I mean, there is already quite some wealth of information, and now looking into what is inclusive business really, what is it all about? I mean, to make this short in terms of definition, we can also call it impact business. It's a viable business that at the end of the day includes the poor population along their value chain, so that they have a social and economic benefit from those businesses. That is what we call inclusive business. Now, I think there the strategy internationally, as it was pointed out also already by Royston, goes clearly towards green, sustainable, and an inclusive Lagos also. I think it is the only way forward if you really want to serve the current generation as well as prepare really a more prosperous ground for future generations. Because such companies like inclusive businesses, they really create a triple win, as we call it. First, they are a viable business, as I just said, and they have a sustainable business model. So that's good for the company. Second, they have a positive social impact or also environmental impact, and that addresses especially the needs of the most disadvantaged and poor population. And the third benefit is actually the government saves on expenditure because there are much more people employed and less dependent on government services. So that's why we always talk here from a triple win when we support, and that is also the reason why we support those kind of business models. I mean, I must say, the Inclusive Business Action Network is financed by the German government and the European Union and implemented by GIZ. So we are spending, so to say, taxpayers' money, and therefore we want to see the impact of that funds really that goes to the poor population at the end of the day. Now, based on our experience working with government and the private sector companies and impact investors, it has really shown that openness and transparency and really an open communication channel, that they are really crucial for moving the needle forward, as also just Royston has mentioned. That's why we support also this kind of public-private policy dialogue in our activities in the countries we are working. Now, in order to have really a bit more impact business, a few points maybe I can mention that showed to be helpful when we're developing the impact market. On the impact investor side and company side, it's Royston tapped on it already. We call it focusing on narrowing the gap between the available investor funds that are not that few and matching actually of the companies, and how do those companies get and need to become investment ready, and how can you better link the right investors with the right companies actually. And then on the government and private sector side still, focusing really on a common understanding of impact. What do we mean then really? And the impact measurement, as it was also mentioned, plays a crucial role. Now, and on the government side, I mean, improving framework conditions for companies that have a social or an environmental impact, I think should be the goal then. These companies are the ones that create actually the jobs for the young generation, and that are so much needed for a population with such an age structure like Lagos and Nigeria in total. And then the criteria for such companies really have to be in place, and following an accreditation system would have to be developed in order then to provide some incentives for such companies that have a social and environmental impact and that are inclusive. And that is, I can still share 2 points learning, let's say, from the international level. At the international level, such guidelines for the promotion of inclusive businesses have been developed for Southeast Asia already. And that has been recognized now by 10 member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So in Southeast Asia, I would say they're a little bit ahead when it comes to those. They have recognized the need for such criteria. And currently we are developing together with UNDP you're finalizing a global inclusive business operational guide, which can then again also be adapted according to the needs and circumstances of individual countries. And I'll leave it here for the moment, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. Really talking about the triple win for not just the inclusive business itself, but for the people at the base of the pyramid, and of course, the community. Everyone benefits in terms of inclusive business. And as you said, also bringing impact businesses together, or matching investors with businesses that are ready for the investment that the investors will provide. So good points that we can carry on for that Lagos can really kind of look at, especially since there's already models in the South-South, in the ASEAN region, in terms of even setting up accreditation system and guideline for promoting inclusive business. So there's a lot that we can learn, and that we've already started to learn with a study trip that we went together with some of our high-level policy leaders from Lagos State, including the former commissioner for agriculture, which we're hoping that the new commissioner now would also come on board to push this forward. So thank you for your insights there. So now we're moving on to our next speaker, Maria Glover, who is the project lead for the Impact Investors Foundation. And as Christian said, and Impact Investor Foundation has done a report on the state of impact investing, not just in Nigeria, but also in Ghana. And with that, the focus of impact investing in Nigeria and some of the work that they've been doing along the lines of even developing and getting investees ready for the monies that will come from the impact investors through the deal summit. They also have an annual summit of bringing together not just investors, but also the social enterprises and some of these impact businesses that Christian talked about. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maria to just really, in terms of the work that the foundation is doing, what are some of the areas that you can, from your report, how can Lagos State really look at the impact investment market and really, try to implement it and support the growth of impact investment in Lagos and by extension, Nigeria? Maria.
Thank you very much, Tony, and a very good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're joining the call. It's a pleasure to be a part of the Lagos Economic Summit in Higbeti. This is my very first time, and I'm really impressed with what the Lagos State government is doing, particularly with the theme for this conference, which is for a greater Lagos, setting the tone for the next decade. I'm particularly excited, so thank you again to the organizers. At the Impact Investors Foundation, the study which we carried out looking at the impact investing landscape for Nigeria and Ghana, it is open source information, and Christian did mention a lot to some of the challenges within the space, and these are also challenges that are prevalent within the impact investing ecosystem in Nigeria. I believe that if the Lagos State government wants to work towards building a more vibrant impact investing ecosystem, or any new market for that matter, it needs to take on three roles. One, as a market builder; second, as a market steward; and as a market participant. And as a market builder, the government needs to take on leadership in driving the impact investing space, signaling interest, and also legitimacy to bring in other actors into the space. Like Royston mentioned earlier on, we need to build a strong ecosystem. We need to bring in financial institutions. We need to bring in development finance institutions, etc., and intermediary actors. The Lagos State government can do that by taking leadership in building the market and doing so. Also in contributing to building the early infrastructure for the market, and also de-risking activities to further build the market. The Lagos State government also, as a steward, should take on the role as a regulator and also a legislator to use policy as a tool to drive impact capital to priority sectors to increase the demand for impact capital. And as a market participant, the Lagos State government can act as a legitimate actor to bring in the private sector and other participants to the space. I would say, Lagos State government hasn't done so badly. I want to appreciate Lagos State for some initiatives that they have put in place. Speaking about the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, there's one trust fund that the Lagos State government as working in partnership with the private sector, pulling resources from them to address the security issues in Lagos State and building very strong security infrastructure. The Lagos State currently is one of the most secure states in Nigeria. And if we have such funds addressing issues like this, I'm thinking that what will happen is that we have a stronger Lagos addressing our social development issues. Another one I'd like to bring an example of is the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. This is another example where the Lagos State government has demonstrated leadership to use, enact legislation to address a social issue, and that's unemployment. Unemployment is a huge problem in Nigeria and in Lagos State. The government, through the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, established this fund in partnership too with other development sector participants and also private sector. The government seeded about 25 billion naira over the space of 4 years and crowding in other participants to the space. So I am particularly excited because this fund in itself, it's a single-digit fund, and also in local denomination, speaking to some of the gaps that were identified in the IIF study as a lack of or scarcity of local currency denominated funds that support early stage enterprises. The Lagos State government has clearly done that particularly well. Looking at the government's focus in terms of creating the Lagos of our dreams and having these very huge dreams of making funds accessible for addressing education, addressing healthcare, addressing power, etc., can use impact investing as that conduit to channel more resources from the private sector to address all of these things. So in these areas, the government should start thinking of how do we create a public-private sector participation to crowding impact capital to address these areas. I think I'll stop here. Maybe in my next conversation, I will look at some other jurisdictions where the government has taken on roles to be a market participant, a market player, or a market builder, and how that has really proliferated the impact investing ecosystem in those countries. So I'd like to hand over to you, Tony, at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I like your point about the fact that Lagos State has done a lot in promoting, coming together and really taking responsibility to address some of our social ills. Security, definitely one that we all know very well needs to be addressed effectively. And then, of course, the issue of unemployment. Everyone has talked about it, and I think from Christian's inclusive business that could help to promote employment for people at the base of the pyramid, from also what Royston talked about the micro bonds that again could help a lot of social enterprises, which again supports social impact across communities. We're now going to move on to our next speaker, Megan. Megan Curran is the West Africa Director for Acumen. And you know, Acumen has celebrated 20 years, which is great. 20 years of impact investing this past April, and has deployed $11 million in social enterprises to social enterprises in West Africa since 2012. Acumen moved its regional office from Accra to Lagos in 2019 to demonstrate their commitment to Lagos and Nigeria, and also has closed its first investment in Nigeria in 2020, November of 2020, they closed their first investment. So again, we've been talking more from a broader perspective. Now we're going to kind of go down and talk more from a specific experience, areas that the Lagos State can really look at in terms of how investors can really support, you know, small to medium-sized enterprises in Lagos and by extension Nigeria. So over to you, Megan. Please tell us a little bit more about what your organization has been doing and how Lagos can continue to, Lagos State government in particular, can learn from how you have orchestrated your business and some of the models that you're using to work with your investees.
Yeah, thanks so much, Toyin. And I think I'll take it in two parts because I think there's a piece that's directly connected to what our experience has been investing in Nigeria and elsewhere. And then also there is kind of a zoom out perspective that as we're reflecting on 20 years of doing this work, where we see other opportunities for government and other stakeholders to play a role. But in terms of our experience in Nigeria, I mean, you know, Royston and Christian, I think both captured a lot of it in terms of the gap between, you know, investor funds and companies that can meet that investment readiness bar. I think what we've seen is even a need to adjust a little bit about our approach and our process, where we may have too closely mirrored sort of a Silicon Valley approach in terms of expectations, documentation, and that there are, you know, such a number of entrepreneurs working on solving really critical social challenges within Nigeria and within their communities who may not speak the lingo or have had as much exposure to institutional investors who are, you know, coming up a bit of a learning curve in terms of the different types of capital and what it really means to take on equity. So I do think the investment readiness work is, there's an opportunity there for more support. You know, in terms of the role of government and the role of the Lagos State, without repeating too much of what Maria had said, I think, you know, the role of the state and the opportunities there could really be around, you know, mimicking in some ways some of what they've done to support the vibrant tech ecosystem in Lagos and expanding it to some of the other sectors that are less tech oriented. You know, I think tech is a hot ticket because you can talk about exponential growth somewhat reasonably, and there's just an energy and enthusiasm around anything tech enabled. And yet when you think about the different social issues or challenges that social enterprises might be willing to, you know, trying to tackle, whether it's housing in informal settlements or questions of healthcare, there may be more of a need for brick and mortar support or a willingness to look at those brick and mortar businesses that may have a tech component, but that's not the end all to be all. And I think connected to that requires a type of patience, both on the part of investors, well, I guess primarily on the part of investors in terms of what scale and what returns may look like. I think, you know, a lot of the impact investing discussions that we end up having in Lagos, I think tend to slide into the doing well by doing good, and that job creation is the biggest need. And so therefore, if you're creating jobs, you're having impact. I think the other way to look at that is that by that definition, any investor is an impact investor, because any investor is trying to generate economic growth. And so how do we distinguish where there might be more of a need to concentrate more on businesses that are delivering critical services at affordable prices for individuals living at the bottom of the pyramid, and can do it in a profitable way and a financially sustainable way, but may not realize, you know, that market rate return in a fixed time period. If I could zoom back out for a second, just because I think nesting this entire conversation in the context of the SDGs, you know, Acumen started out and still does really focusing our investments on companies that were doing exactly what I was just talking about, providing access to affordable goods and services for individuals living below the poverty line. And while we have seen where we've been able to do that really effectively in sectors like renewable energy, where creating access to energy for people living off the grid has pretty tangible social outcomes and outputs, I think we may not ever get all the way to solving the SDGs if we leave it to these small startups and isolate the impact investing community. And I think there's a more mainstream effort. There's a fable in public health, which is like two men are swimming in a river, and they see a child coming down the river who's drowning, and so they pull the child out, and no sooner do they save that one, but two more are coming down. And so they're in this cycle of jumping into the river and pulling the children out, until finally one of them gets out and starts walking upstream. And they say, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to figure out who's throwing these kids in the river." And I think there's a little bit of a risk within the impact investing sector, and you know, as you think of the role of government as well, if we're just focused on solving the SDGs and not paying attention to the conditions that created the need for the SDGs in the first place and the need for social enterprise in the first place, then we'll keep ourselves busy for the next couple of decades trying to fill that funding gap, trying to solve these issues of healthcare, of renewable energy, of education. But how do we ask the same questions of the mainstream investors and the mainstream corporates that we're asking of the impact communities, so that we're not, you know, isolating that burden on a subsector, but really recognizing that regardless of what sector, whether you're in oil and gas or you're, you know, working in textiles, you're either contributing to inequality or you're trying to be part of the solution. And I'll stop in a second, but I'll just end with one example, which is one of our West Africa fellows runs a company in Ghana, and through the experience of COVID, recognized, you know, they kind of wanted to give back and do something, but they weren't really sure what, and recognized that actually the most impactful thing they could do was to pay their lowest wage workers a living wage, which would have been a 30% increase on what they've been currently paying them. And that by directly providing that economic opportunity for those families would have a more sustainable and far-reaching impact than contributing to palliatives or PPE or some short-term kind of public social initiative or social fix. And that required them to have their board on board and their investors on board, because it would push out the profitability, you know, the break-even point of the company by a couple of years, and have real impacts on the business. And yet it felt like their most powerful kind of social intervention could be exactly through their core business and not something ancillary. So I just, yeah, I wanted to raise that because I think there's something there in, you know, this community is so tight knit, and we're seeing increased collaboration and support for social enterprises, and we need more impact investors in the space. But at the same time, I think we also have to think about how to make the tent bigger and make it a more mainstream conversation, if you will.
Thank you very much, Megan. Like you said, you know, the story that you told, I think sums up, that you shared sums up the whole essence of the work that we all have to do. I think we all need to be in the business of getting ourselves out of business of this social impact. You know, if we really start going downstream to find out who's throwing the, you know, the child into the water in the first place, what's causing, what are some of the underlying causes of some of these enterprises that we're trying to help and scale up, and of course the gap between, you know, the investors and the investees, which everyone has touched on, which I think is very critical. And the other piece that I was actually waiting for you to say is the whole essence of Silicon Valley expectations, which leads to now more of our promotion around, you know, patient capital. That, you know, we cannot turn around. Unfortunately, yes, you know, we are godlike, but, you know, God made, you know, man in you know, 7 days, within a 7-day period. But we're not going to make that kind of miracle happen in turning around our social enterprises in a year or 2 years or 3 years that some of these grants traditionally would say. So really kind of looking at patient capital as part of a way of really spreading out and really seeing transformation happen within a period of maybe 5 to 10 years versus the 3 to 5 years that normally traditional funding really requires. So really looking at different ways of bringing funding together. And tying that to what Royston said earlier in terms of not just throwing the word blended finance around, but really looking at how can investors really come together and, you know, from the philanthropic end all the way to commercial market, how do we kind of work through this continuum of capital to co-invest for, you know, more greater social impact that would lead to us meeting the SDG goals in the next, you know, in this decade. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Claire. Claire, sorry, I'm going to have to really pronounce your name, last name. Claire.
Sarowski, don't worry about it.
Sarowski. Sarowski. Yeah, I want to try because we all need to learn to pronounce names. I know my last name gets messed up as well sometimes in other parts of the world. So I want to learn to say your name correctly. So Claire Sarowski is the regional manager for U.S. Trade and Development Authority. And even though we're going to forgive her calling us from Accra and staying in Accra, I'm sure like Acumen, they will move to Lagos very soon. Well, the next, you know, Claire will kind of give us really more, we'll focus more on how the rubber meets the road in terms of planning. How do you really kind of get into how, you know, the execution and some of the risk that's involved in executing, you know, sustainable finance within and impact investing within this market. So, you know, without further ado, Claire, please tell us how Lagos State can manage some of these execution risks that's connected to sustainability finance and impact investing.
Thank you, Toyin. And first of all, I just want to echo my fellow speakers' thanks to the Lagos state government for putting this together. And the Lagos Economic Summit, I think, is clearly an effort that has brought together really amazing thinkers and shows the kind of dedication that Lagos has to trying to solve the toughest problems. And I think that my first trip to Lagos was at the beginning of 2020, pre-COVID, and what struck me the most was just how vibrant it was. But Lagos is just an extremely vibrant city, big city, and it has so many great thinkers and folks that are
Yeah, these are the topics we have.
together.
We have tax administration.
Sorry, Claire, hold on 1 second, Claire. I think we're getting. Hold on 1 second, Claire. We're getting some interference. Can everyone please mute your microphone so that we can hear Claire? Thank you very much. Everyone, please put your microphone on mute. Yes, thank you. Over to you, Claire.
Thanks. Yeah, so Lagos is just incredibly vibrant, and I think everybody can agree that that's the case. And we are really excited to continue working with Lagos State and others in the region to continue to support the kind of development that that Lagos envisions and realize this Lagos of the future. So we actually do have a local presence in Lagos that I want to highlight as well. U.S. Trade and Development Agency has my wonderful colleague Josh Egba, who's based in Lagos and is constantly working for us to help us connect to folks on the ground and really great projects. And so I would flag that that if you are in Lagos and looking for a local contact, Josh is there, but I'm always available as well. So maybe I'll just step back and tell everybody a little bit about U.S. Trade and Development Agency and what we do and how we kind of fit into this picture. So U.S. Trade and Development Agency is the U.S. government's project preparation agency. And we really focus on that element, that early stage project development where you've got a great concept, but you really need to get it to a place where you can have, even impact investors look at it. But hopefully making that transition past impact investing onto commercial investors, other public financiers. And so we exist basically to help companies, to help governments get their projects to a place where it can attract that kind of larger scale investment. What Megan was talking about, making that transition from smaller scale impact investing to larger scale projects and impact. And so we are part of that process. We basically, like I said, we can work with the private sector, the public sector, and we really focus on infrastructure development. So again, as Megan noted, getting to the root of some of these challenges, what are the broader issues that are preventing sustainable growth, sustainable economic development, inclusive growth? We really focus on infrastructure as the key to unlocking a lot of that. And so we focus primarily on 3 areas of infrastructure. One is energy, and I'll talk a lot more about that because that's the main thing that we've worked on in Lagos thus far. But we also focus on ICT, telecommunications, creating that network that will enable the use of mobile money and financial inclusion and things like that. So ICT is another area of infrastructure that we're heavily involved in. And then we also are engaged in transportation infrastructure, health infrastructure, and agricultural infrastructure. And I think that again, the main thing to come back to, and Toyin said, what is your advice for Lagos State? We always come back to planning and project preparation. And so for us, that's really the heart of unlocking a lot of these issues, is really good planning and then follow through on that planning. And so we can provide grants, trying to use a small amount of public funds to unlock that larger private finance. So we can use grant funding for technical assistance and feasibility studies to basically help develop, do the environmental and social impact assessments that a major infrastructure project needs, do the economic and financial analysis, do the technical analysis, depending on the type of project. So we can provide that small amount of grant funding, usually anywhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million to give, work on that project preparation. That again is what commercial investors and impact investors really need to invest in a project. Like I said, we focus a lot on that critical infrastructure that will hopefully unlock a lot of the sustainable development. So one of the major areas that we've focused on is energy. And this is really both a top-down and a bottom-up approach that we're taking to this sector, because you need both. So there are a lot of innovations in terms of on-scale, grid-scale electricity provision, solar, wind, gas, and you do need those larger scale projects that are going to feed into the grid and provide, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 megawatts of energy onto the grid that can sustain real industrial development and real sustainable growth. And so we've supported a number of different projects with Lagos State and others focused on that kind of larger scale grid connected work. And so, for example, we've supported CNG development in Lagos State and a bunch of other things. And then I would say that there are other projects outside of Lagos State that we've supported that we'd love to do similar things in Lagos State. In Kano, for example, we have supported a 100 megawatt solar embedded generation project. And that's the kind of thing that we would love to get involved in and support in Lagos State as well. So we've got this top-down approach, and then we've also got the bottom-up approach to try to bring these things together and really solve the energy challenges that Lagos State and others are facing in Nigeria. And so from the bottom-up side of things, we've been really involved in a lot of innovation. So there's been a ton of innovation in both technology and in financial models and business models for embedded generation, for small-scale mini-grids that can support greater development, and solar home systems and things like that. So we've supported a number of projects that really focus on mini-grids, solar mini-grids. Now you can have a solar plus battery mini-grid that can provide you the same quality of energy that a diesel generator can. And so trying to take advantage of those innovations in the market and get those out into the field through really good project preparation. And so we've supported mini-grid projects across Nigeria. We've worked also with Ikeja and Echo Discos to try to work with them to advance their business models and operating abilities through smart grid technologies to basically be able to enable bringing on a lot of these new technologies so that they can either be incorporated or be standalone distributed energy resources within the DISCOs. So there's a lot of innovation, and I think that one thing we really try to focus on is how we can come to the table, bring our project preparation tool, provide that small amount of grant funding that will then allow private sector or public sector to unlock that larger amount of commercial investment, whether it be from impact investors or from more traditional investors. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Toyin.
Thank you so much, Claire, and thank you for again your contribution around really kind of looking at infrastructure as a way to unlock some of the work that needs to be done within social impact area around energy, telecommunication, ICT, and really looking at the fact that you look at both the bottom perspective and the top and bottom perspective in terms of how to really kind of support this infrastructure development that would unlock more funding from other investors who want to invest in critical areas in Nigeria and Africa, I'm sure, as a whole. And with that, we have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that I ask each one of you a question. And at this point, too, if there are anybody in the audience that have questions, please put it in the chat so that our panelists can start to answer some of your questions. And if the technical team can enable the chat so that we can see the questions, that would be very helpful. So moving on, I'm going to bring Rustin back. We're going to go back again the way we started, to really kind of, so I'm going to ask you two questions, Rustin, that you can fit into one, and please use maybe 2 minutes to answer it. So, in terms of impact investing, what role can Lagos, what can Lagos State do to really kind of embrace and incorporate this arena of impact investing into, and bring, to have financing the social sector? How can we kind of bring that impact investing in to finance social sector within Lagos State? And then what's your, any big project that needs to be done requires everyone, leaving their logos and egos and, dropping it at the door to kind of come together to work collaboratively together. So what sort of message do you have for Lagos State in terms of really implementing some of these models that you've talked about and some of the social impact bonds that you've done in India, so that we can, so you're giving us some secrets that we can surpass India. So over to you, Royston.
Thank you so much. And again, hopefully we'll cross the finishing line together and nobody surpasses the other. I think the war against poverty needs all arms to be linked. But I think what I would like to do is use a bit of a cheeky answer in terms of how the Lagos State could, really create the city of dreams, both for impact and for the broader, ecosystem and the broader planet that Megan talked about, rather than just looking at the impact space. And I'm going to use the acronym of LAGOS to give us 5 specific areas that Lagos could look at. And let me start with the S first and move backwards. So first is, real focus on sustainable finance. And I know that there's many themes today. CDC calls it just transition. Somebody else calls it SDG financing. But I think the overall focus on sustainable financing as a tool, as a critical element of mainstream financing and not just a peripheral object, I think is critical. And I'm moving backwards. So the O is to look at outcome-based financing. I think there is a paradigm clearly that's looking at pay for success, that's looking at results-based financing. Lagos has an opportunity to sort of embrace that and try and translate a lot of the aid that is coming in into pay for success models, because that makes the philanthropic naira or dollar or euro much more efficient if we can distill it to pay for success models. It builds credibility, it builds trust, it builds impact. The other one is on G, to look at government support and policies. I think the central bank needs to be a lot more bullish in terms of products that can be allowed. I think regulation sandboxes that Singapore has tried and other countries have tried, using of cryptocurrency, using of blockchain, are they ways to be able to democratize funding access? Is there a way to bring in a social stock exchange? So what are those government policies and regulations that need to be built in to create a robust system? The A is to look at authentic measurement tools. People talked about that earlier in the panel, but how do we create trustworthy certifications, measurements that are authentic, that are measurable, and that are consistent with both not only the 17 SDGs, because people love talking about the 17, but there are 169 indicators under each of those. Not too many of us would know those by heart. And until we get into the nitty-gritty, we can't go to Megan's point of how do we really sort of solve the problem at the big corporate level and at the big fund level, because we need to be asking those questions and then seeing and sort of working backwards to where those problems originate from. And then, creating that authentic measurement piece. And finally, the L is leaving no one behind, because unless we're able to create that mechanism, that you talked about of going up the river and finding out who's creating the problem, or Christian talked about how do we make sure that the smallest enterprise has got capacity building through IBAN or others, or Claire talked about, how do we make sure that there are policies and ecosystems that are looking at the universe, looking at the environment, looking at the holistic development, until we bring that into place. So leaving no one behind, L, A, authentic measurement, G, government policies, O, outcome-based financing. We will then be able to really truly be sustainable, and sustainable financing can play a role. Thank you.
Awesome. Lagos with as an acronym. So Lagos themes, and Mr. Governor also has an acronym for Lagos in terms of his vision for Lagos and the dream for Lagos. So now we have Lagos theme, or Theme Lagos. Fantastic. Thank you. We're going to turn it over now to Christian. Christian, so what are you doing in Lagos? What are some of the areas, or again, your own recommendation, if you will, for Lagos State in terms of embracing this impact businesses and inclusive business? Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love this acronym, and I would like to come up now. I spell it forward, but great, thanks, Royston, for that. I mean, it nicely sums it up. Maybe what I can do is still tell a little bit on what we started to do in Lagos or in Nigeria. I mean, I think it just pointed there before I come then with some final comments on that. Toyin, you mentioned already before that we actually supported this exchange of peers, so to say, among policymakers. We did it towards the end of 2019, when we had really this high-level delegation from Nigeria. We brought them to Southeast Asia, and there it was just fantastic to see how peers interact with each other, and policymakers just share from Southeast Asia countries. We had 6 of them there represented, how they shared what they did over the last 2.5 years when they became more aware, what does it actually mean, inclusive business, etc. And we just facilitated the dialogue, and it was great to see the learning actually, and how fast it really can happen. And one result is, or that came out of this, was actually, as you mentioned, that we got the request from the Commissioner of the Lagos Ministry of Agriculture to support them in developing an inclusive business policy. And then exactly almost 1 year ago, some of my team were there in Lagos, and we started with a fact-finding mission, and then came COVID-19 in between, and we had to readjust everything. And so what we did then was, last year, we really started to support the establishment of the COVID-19 Impact Consortium that is being led by the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance, the Impact Investor Foundation, and also another GIZ-supported program, NICOP. And within this consortium, one of our support area is really geared towards the development of policy recommendations for enabling framework conditions for inclusive businesses. So, but I'm sure that maybe Maria from IIF will still tackle on that, so I will not say anything more on that part, but we are glad that we can really continue to contribute and to bring different actors together, because I'm convinced that it really saves transaction costs that often occur. And so in the future, we are planning to continue our IB policy development program and support also a matchmaking process between inclusive businesses and impact investors. And so maybe one last is for the development of an inclusive business policy. There it is really crucial that we have a key person or champion for inclusive business that is being identified within the government that really can pull the strings forward. So there we really look forward to continue our cooperation with all partners from government and private sectors in Lagos. And well, to ask also somehow on a recommendation in a nutshell, I would really just say, see what you have and what is already there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Continue to learn from others who have been in a similar situation, because this saves really time and transaction costs. And I'll leave it by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. So Christian, you mentioned the importance of IB policy development, matching between investors and investees, and really creating that enabling environment for inclusive business to grow, and by that having champions within government to really kind of pull that together. And I would even say, again, because of our focus at AVPA in terms of the power of partnerships, really bringing government, private sector, development sector together to really kind of promote these sort of tools and strategies that help to really engage the base of the pyramid, not just as recipient of goods, but really as engaged participants, people that have skills and value to contribute into the value chain. So thank you for that. We're going to move on now to Maria. So Maria can tell us a little bit about, what are some of the practical ways that the government can really, that the Lagos State government can really carry out its role in practice, as you look at the impact investment landscape in Nigeria, and then specifically, obviously, Lagos being the leader in this area. Over to you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tony. It's been a very interesting conversation, I must add. And I'm particularly excited to sit down under Royston to hear his thoughts. And he alluded to some practical solutions I'd like to reiterate that Lagos State government needs to focus and really drive. And one of these is this micro bonds as a complementary to other support that the Lagos State government is currently doing. It's important that whatever solutions that we are championing or going to work or put forward must work, must be realistic, must actually solve problems. And what he said is this SDG impact bond that really changes how the focus has been on the commissioner as opposed to what the bond is being created to solve. And this is really genius in my own estimation. And I think the government needs to ask themselves also some practical questions that I think the UK government asked themselves very much early in the year, in the journey of putting together the social impact investment markets. One of the questions that they ask themselves is, how do we attract and leverage investment from outside the government by increasing the supply and the demand for capital? Some of these practical solutions that Royston alluded to would answer that question quite clearly, and how can we create products that actually meet the market and also to grow the impact investing space. And the second question which was asked, which I also would like to ask the Lagos State government, is this: how do we position the government to design, commission, and deliver social services and harnessing social investment? One of the things that the UK government did was to become the biggest buyer in social services. And that really changed their paradigm on how they commission contracts. So the Lagos State government can adopt the O in Lagos acronym that Royston talked about. It is outcome-based, to focus on the results. This will eliminate, one, corruption. It will focus the government to pay only for services when the outcomes have been achieved. Looking at the times we're in, resources are slim, the government is really struggling, outcome-based financing can really be the game changer for Lagos State government, and Lagos State government really needs to focus on that. And in also developing the impact investing market, I'd like to add, finally, Tony, that the government can partner with other intermediary actors and actors in this space who are growing and advancing the impact investing market. One of such partnership is with the National Advisory Board for Impact Investing, which is going to be the highest body for promoting impact investments in the country. And the National Advisory Board, IIF is working with other stakeholders, some of whom are here, to establish the board, which will bring in leaders from across the 5 impact investing ecosystem to identify barriers and provide solutions to addressing those challenges. So welcome the government to be a part of it. And another initiative which I would like to warmly welcome the government and also other stakeholders is the COVID-19 Impact Consortium that Christian mentioned. And the consortium is a platform for a more coordinated response to the COVID-19 pandemic and also other crisis management. Today is COVID, tomorrow, and still today, again, I must add, is insecurity. So there will be always one crisis or the other. We need to start increasing our capacities in handling crisis management. And the COVID-19 Impact Consortium gives that opportunity to stakeholders from government, impact investors, and investors across the impact continuum, impact enterprises, inclusive businesses to build their capacities to respond to crisis management. And the consortium has 4 main pillars. We have the shared emergency liquidity facility, we have the advisory and facilitation, we also have the communication, knowledge sharing, and we have the government engagement. These are the 4 main pillars. And the shared emergency liquidity facility, which I'd like to invite the government to bring in de-risking investments, to crowd in private sector investments to set up this fund. And this is quite similar to what the UK government did during this COVID-19 pandemic era, to set up a shared emergency liquidity fund that social organizations that impact enterprises had access to survive during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. It is so critical. It is so critical. So I'd like to invite members of the community to be a part of the COVID-19 Impact Consortium. And finally, in engaging the government seemed not to understand what impact investing is, what it seeks to achieve, and also inclusive business in trying to provide critical services to those at the base of the pyramid. So we would like to engage with the government to bring impact at the heart of recovery and in every conversation that is going on, especially in a critical situation as now. I think at this point, I'd like to hand over to you, Toyin.
Thank you very much. Great points about, outcome-based financing can be a great game changer, and the fact that, we're inviting the government to join us on the National Advisory Board and also on the COVID-19 Impact Consortium to really kind of, and especially through the shared liquidity facility, to really help in de-risking some of the funds that are being aggregated to support small to medium enterprises and medium sized enterprises that are being affected by the pandemic and of course the ongoing recession that's going on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to again, give us your perspective in terms of what Lagos State should be doing. You've done your first investment in November of 2020, and I'm sure you want to do more. So what is the role of government in helping you to ensure that more social enterprises get more funding so that they can scale up?
Yeah, thanks, Toyin. I'll try to be brief, and I have to be a bit more clever going forth than to not repeat what's already been said, but share enthusiasm for what a lot of Royston and Christian and Maria all brought forth. One thing I was thinking about as just as they were talking is, Lagos State has been such a leader in so many ways in fostering a productive and vibrant startup ecosystem. And so when I think about 2 opportunities that they might have to build on that or amplify that in this context, I think one is kind of holding the line on what their definition of the impact or inclusive business might be, and what incentives or support can be designed specifically for the impact community or the social enterprise community within the broader startup ecosystem. The second is because it's such a stronghold and such a hub, if you will, I do also wonder what role the Lagos state government might play in helping to bring along some of the federal agencies and some of the federal government players in this journey of establishing a more robust ecosystem. I think so many of the challenges that our entrepreneurs face in building businesses in Lagos or elsewhere in Nigeria go back to regulatory policies, infrastructure challenges, other things that sit at the federal government level. But I wonder how the Lagos state government might be a bridge or a champion for those enterprises in that context. On the second question around collaboration, in a way, I think you gave the answer when you mentioned the question, which is how do we leave our logos and our egos at the door? And for me, that's the answer when it comes to collaboration. You know, Acumen with 2 other early stage Nigerian investors last year launched a very small relief fund for COVID. And it was really an exercise in like practicing a little bit more trust and a little bit less logos and egos than we might normally operate with, to be able to share decision making about how the funds were going to be deployed and kind of trust the process of working with other parties that we knew were, you know, values aligned and wanted to see the same outcomes for some of these high impact early stage enterprises that we were worried wouldn't make it through, of course, at the time, what we thought would be a shorter COVID period. But I think we learned a lot from that experience. And I think starting small on those collaborations with trusted partners that have that alignment of values and ethos, and that can then become the model to bring other partners and other parties into the fold or into you know, the project or the initiative.
Thank you very much, Megan. Quick highlights from what you've said. You know, Lagos State being a champion for some of the social enterprises, you know, leaving the egos and logos at the door in terms of helping bringing partners together that have similar values and ethics and you know, trust in the process as we move forward. So those are very important pieces. Claire, before you come on, Claire, we have, and you might know that apart from people online with us, we also have audience that is seated at the Eco Hotel. And just want to thank everyone for joining us and for staying over. We know that we were supposed to start at 6, but this is such a rich conversation that we're going over. And we have some questions from the audience as well that we want to field real quickly. So panelists, I am begging your indulgence for more minutes. I know it's late for you, Royston, in India. So we'll share that wine some other time for staying late. And so over to you, Claire. What, you know, again, looking at the practical elements for, you know, Lagos State, how can Lagos State really kind of execute this, you know, this risk that they, you know, being able to de-risk some of the areas that you're supporting in terms of your infrastructure projects?
Thanks. Since we're past and we're still going to do questions, I'll keep it really short and sweet. And it really has to do with what Royston said about looking at the outcome that you're looking for. And so prioritizing the outcome that you want to achieve, and then backing that up with really good project preparation. And so again, I think that's really what we focus on in terms of getting to execution, is knowing what you want and then doing that hard but really important project preparation in a detailed way that will allow you to attract the investment that you need. So I'll just keep it short and sweet.
Project preparation, very important. Thank you very much. So over to the audience, questions that you might have for our esteemed panelists. Like I said, we've, you know, held you guys till the end, but as you've heard, just rich, valuable contributions and information from each of our panelists. So technical team, can you please turn it over to the first person who wants to ask the question? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and all the panelists. My name is Tejo Abisoye, the Executive Secretary at the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. Our name has been mentioned in the conversation, but what I'd like to say to
Yes.
So my question is really to Rustin and to Claire, and is basically around the fact that, so while our mandate is actually addressing youth unemployment, we recognize that the work we do can be tied to about 10 of the SDGs today, including partnerships for the goals. But I'm very curious about the social impact bonds, because we've been researching and we've been doing a lot of work on that to raise funds to be able to do the work we do at the Employment Trust Fund. And my question really is around the measurement and evaluation. Now, if the firms are independent, who pays for that? Who pays them in that structure? Because if they're paid by, for example, if I'm trying to get the bond, then they need me to succeed to get paid. And then Rustin also mentioned authentic measurement tools. And what kind of examples can he give us about the tools for measurement? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teju. Great to see you virtually. Royston, over to you.
Thank you for that excellent question. And before I let Toyin escape by saying wine later, I'm going to take a rain check, not on the wine, but on the Nigerian band and the music. I still vividly remember I celebrated my birthday in Lagos, and it was probably one of the most fun nights, thanks to Christian and Toyin and all of you. So not so much the wine, but the music. But let's get back to the question. The fact that we've done an SDG 8 bond, which is on livelihoods, and connected it to skilling. And you're absolutely right that there are more than 7 or 8 SDGs that can be sort of wrapped around livelihoods and skilling. But what we did, and again, it's interesting because Acumen was the guarantee provider for that bond. So it's really interesting to see how many partners can come together to create, a micro bond for skilling and livelihoods. And I'll sort of talk to the 2 specific questions you made. One was, we defined very clearly what those milestones should be. So the number of hours of training, the certifications for the training, the placement in the jobs, the number of months in the job for getting them confirmed, and the mentoring along the way in the job. So these were all part of the milestones that the skilling or vocation training provider was, providing to the youth who needed jobs. So it was a very detailed list of outcomes. And then what we did was, we talked to CSR, because it's possible that, and one of the statistics we've seen in India is about 30% of CSR funding or corporate social responsibility funding is lost, is wasted for a variety of reasons. The project doesn't work, there's leakage in the system, there is a flood, there is a drought, there is COVID now. So a lot of these, when you pay upfront, earlier CSR would put the money upfront, and then the projects would get done and they would get a report. Now 30% on an average sometimes was not effective. What we are saying is, when you move to an outcome or payment or pay for success model, then you're putting your investment lira or your naira or your investment dollar at the end. So only when the outcome is met. And so therefore we ask you to pay 20% premium or 15% premium, because you've effectively, A, made sure that you're paying only when the outcome is done, and B, you're not putting the money up front, so you're also time value of money wise better off. And so in that model, that 15% or whatever is the premium that you're paying for having the luxury of putting money only when the outcome is met, goes into picking up the costs, whether it's the interest cost or the measurement cost or the certification cost along the way. So that covers the cost. And so that ecosystem and the education and the awareness of that ecosystem needs to be built. But for example, with Megan on the call, Acumen had a spin-off called 60 Decibels, and they created an impact measurement where they actually make sure the grassroots. Grameen has a Progress Out of Poverty Index. So there are many specialists who are measuring impact today, and we're seeing that tribe increase.
Thank you, Royston.
Any other questions in the audience, either from our virtual participants or people that are physically at Eco Hotel? Fantastic. I'm hearing from our team on ground that there are no more questions. So at this point, I just want to, again, thank each one of our esteemed panelists. Royston from India, Christian from Bonn, Germany, Maria from Lagos, and Megan, who is also Lagos, but now, in the States temporarily, and Claire, who is in Accra, Ghana, that we've forgiven because her colleague is in Lagos. We thank you very much for your time, for the great, valuable insights. And really, when we're looking at this sustainable finance and investment, one of the things that our landscape study from the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance really showed that, yes, there's all these great evolution and trends that are coming up in green bonds and social impact bonds. And because we don't know how, so many people are being, some of these things are being deployed in Nigeria and Ghana, but hearing specific examples of how it was done and how we can now bring it to Lagos State, and how Lagos State can really kind of catalyze and use its own funds to really de-risk and to make this come alive, is part of what we are going to be looking forward to. And so developing social impact bonds is going to be one of the recommendations that we're going to suggest to Mr. Governor. Leveraging alternative funding models for nonprofits, which also Royston talked about, and Christian with inclusive business and some of the ways that the people at the base of the pyramid could really be contributors to economic growth, which creates a win-win. And really, again, just supporting social enterprises, startups, small to medium organizations, and really helping them to grow as we continue on this journey, and helping them to grow in a way that is sustainable, not just in words, but really kind of going, as Megan said, to really kind of looking at what's the root cause of some of these problems, and how can we begin to do both, and really kind of creating some innovations and models that work, and looking at areas in other parts of the world that have actually implemented it, so that we're not recreating the wheel, but also really kind of looking at how do we minimize some of the root cause of these problems in all of our communities. And if any place can have this done, definitely Lagos State can, and we can continue to create and start working, actually starting from today, creating this Lagos of our dreams that will surpass all the other mega cities of the world, and Lagos will continue to be and can be the destination point for many investors for years to come, so that we can continue to grow and have social impacts, not just in Lagos, but Nigeria as an extension. So again, I want to thank everybody for all your support and valuable contribution. And I wish everyone safe, to stay safe, because we didn't travel, so I won't say travel, but those that are in Eco Hotel, journey, safe travels back to your homes, and stay safe, and come back tomorrow for the third day of Enyegbeti Summit, which, again, promises to be another engaging and productive session. So thank you. God bless.